So has the government approach to this point been misplaced? The Treasurer would argue that given the anemic growth in the economy, uh, the fact that we have any growth is due to that public sector.
Well, that is right, and that's part of the problem that our economy is being driven totally by government spend at the moment because the circumstances and conditions aren't right for private sector investment and private sector growth. You saw in the latest GDP numbers, Kieran, that the private sector has gone backwards again, and if it wasn't for that government spending, we would have been contraction. So you can have an argument about where the focus should be on the supply side or on the demand side. And we would argue that the focus really has to shift. And the Treasurer has conceded this in recent days, that more has got to be done to help create the circumstances for the private sector to grow, to start to hire again and to become even more competitive.
Mm.
We've got this huge productivity problem in the country, and spending it on government services, which are pretty much non-productive in the economic sense, is not going to help our productivity malaise.
The other issue that he points out, though, that some of the, or a fair percentage of the spend, the increased spend, is indexation of things like pension payments, things that are inexorable or inevitable.
As the government has decided to call them automatic. Look, that's part of an issue that governments have to deal with, and all businesses have to deal with that too. When they're working through their budgets and their bottom lines, there are expectations around increases linked to CPI and the like. So government's no different to the private sector there. So that's not news. That's not something that's just happened overnight. That's been in the works for a very long time and been well known. But that's just part of the issue that we have here. The problem is that the bottom line for the country is now, is getting very, very treacherous. We're about to hit $1 trillion in government debt in 25, 26. That's a lot of debt that we're going to be carrying forward. And at some point, we're going to have to find a way to start cutting into that, getting that debt down, so that we can keep our economy afloat. The problem is, Kieran, that we're moving more and more towards a government-supported economy rather than a private sector economy, and the private sector is where you get the drive, the competition, the innovation and the growth.
Will that $1 trillion in debt ever be paid off?
Well, you'd hope so. It's got to be an aspiration of government and of businesses themselves to sort of pay down debt and to run their books and to balance their books. We can't just keep accumulating debt and hope that it is inconsequential and doesn't have consequences for the economy. The problem is that graph on screen now is just showing us is that we now have a decade of built-in, baked-in deficits. We have a structural deficit problem now within the economy, and that's not going to get any easier. As we think about what's happening in the Chinese economy, upon which we're so reliant when it comes to commodity prices. What's going to happen? Just think about the hypothetical when Donald Trump perhaps comes to us, as he's likely to go to NATO and say, increase your defence spending to 3% of GDP from just about 2.1 where it is now, and it's actually going down next year. You put all those sort of problems together, we've got to fundamentally rethink how we formulate a budget. That, Kieran, is why we need to have big thinking process around tax reform, regulatory reform, and the like. And we keep coming back to productivity. We've got to drive that to drive our economy forward.
Australian Industry Group Chief Willox, great to chat as always.
Thanks,
you.
Kieran. Take care. Have a good Christmas.